Hello everybody, I'm Jmulls of Jmulls Gaming, and I wanted to make a video on the actual state of Final Fantasy XIV right now that we're kind of entering this bit of a lull period, right before we get a bunch of live letters for the future of the game, but also after a lot of the content for 7.0 has already come out. So I think it's a good time to take a step back and just talk a bit about everything, because there's so many little topics that I could talk about and make separate videos on, but I feel that'd be kind of just farming, so let's kind of wrap it all up in one video here. I think it's safe to say that Final Fantasy XIV Dawntrail is one of, if not the most polarizing time periods in all of Final Fantasy XIV. It definitely is, at least for me, and throughout my tenure with Final Fantasy XIV ever since I started in Stormblood. But I noticed there's been a lot of division and a lot of arguing going back and forth on various elements of Final Fantasy XIV, and this is not uncommon for MMORPGs, let alone Final Fantasy XIV, but there's a definite difference between constructive feedback and criticism and then just what comes across as just basic whining. And I think we're definitely seeing a lot of elements of both with Dawntrail as well. I think it's safe to say that for me and for many other people, the actual narrative that happened in Dawntrail wasn't particularly good. I think it's solidly okay. There's nothing I find particularly memorable outside of the Final Fantasy IX fan service, and me being a Final Fantasy IX fan, I like that. And there's certain elements that I do really enjoy, but the story on the whole is compromised because of certain elements that I think are played way too much or played way too little. And look, let's address the elephant in the room here, the whole controversy surrounding Wuklamot. If you follow a lot of gaming discourse, which I tend to do, you'll know about the word woke and the whole culture war crap that can infest itself into a lot of gaming discourse in particular. Not just gaming discourse, online can go to pretty much everything, but especially in gaming discourse. And we have seen that happen with Dawntrail, with the English VO of Wuklamot being trans, and it's crappy. That's the most PG way I can put it here. It's just objectively bad in my opinion. I think there's a lot of legitimate reasons to not like the story of Dawntrail, and a lot of legitimate reasons to not like the character of Wuklamot, or at least the execution of the character of Wuklamot. But the problem with a lot of these culture war arguments, at least the issues they tend to raise, is they move the goalpost, they move the area of argument away from actionable, constructive criticism and feedback that could be utilized to inform the wider consumer base on the whole, or even the developers to possibly shift or course correct in the future. And it shifts the conversation away from actual helpful feedback and interesting discussion to basic culture war crap that we see all over the internet. And it's the most mind-numbing, excruciating drivel you'll ever see. It reeks of idiocy so rancid that you don't even want to engage with that at all. And I think there's a few issues that arise with what is becoming a more prevalent discussion with the whole culture war crap, is that one, it's just bad, right? It's just morally bankrupt and transphobic. That's number one. But then number two, or 1B here, would be that it's moving the conversation away from actual constructive feedback and moving the spotlight away from topics that could be discussed more to possibly improve the game in the future or inform people, and moving it away to just drivel. At the end of the day, it's Final Fantasy XIV, so I still did enjoy what I played of Dawntrail, but I can't say I particularly enjoyed Dawntrail all that much in the grand scheme of things, and my opinion on the actual story and narrative that happened in Dawntrail is continuing to sour. But we kind of come into this other issue I see with a lot of online gaming discourse, and especially when it comes to MMORPGs, because these are games that ask a lot of time and commitment from the player, so people can become extremely, I don't know if I want to say ingrained in the discussion or ingrained in certain elements of the game and become very defensive about them, but a lot of people can start to just dig into their own personal trenches and whatever little mini war they want to fight, and they put blinders on and only see that one little narrow perspective. So either you can really hate Final Fantasy XIV Dawntrail and you detest every element of it, or you love it unabashedly and everyone else is just a hater or whatever. I've also seen some rare, albeit, takes from some people that if you don't like Dawntrail, then you must be a transphobe or something like that, because of those vocal people we talked about before that try and shift discussion in gaming to just a culture war one. Those people are crazy as well, but when it comes to Final Fantasy XIV at least, it's one of my favorite games of all time. It's a top 3, possibly top top 2 game of all time for me. I love this game and I love it unabashedly, and there's a lot of times where I just go back and think of all the great memories that I have with Final Fantasy XIV, whether it's just doing extreme trials with a buddy of mine back in Shadowbringers, or some of my favorite moments in the story, or whatnot, just anything. I have a lot of fond memories for this game, so of course, because of those, I would want to enjoy the game. And I think Dawntrail is kind of a tale of 2 parts. We talked about before how the MSQ of Dawntrail feels like it's split in 2, where you have this Rite Succession part, and then you have the whole Alexandria element. But for me, the more I think about it, the real divide happens between the MSQ and the postgame. Because I think the postgame of Dawntrail has been super good, and I think overall extremely well received, while it's the MSQ that's largely polarizing. But even when it comes to like the end game, there's still some conversation about whether or not that Dawntrail is too hard or not hard enough, what yada yada yada. But the more I think about it, and the more I do the Arcadian raids, the more I'm just like, this feels far more in line with the style of storytelling that I came to appreciate all those years ago with Final Fantasy XIV than I saw at any point in the actual Dawntrail MSQ. It's not just a matter of tone or the type of comedy or the type of characterization it does, well, kind of that last one. It's more so just the package on the whole. For large swaths of the MSQ, it felt like glorified side quests and Beast Tribe quests, and I know I've seen a few comments in my previous videos that apparently one of the main writers for Dawntrail was someone they had writing the Beast Tribe quests before. I don't know how true that is, but I can definitely feel that if that does, or if that is what happened. Like, in a lot of ways, it felt like I did a Heavensward or a Stormblood Beast Tribe quest, but that was just most of the MSQ for Dawntrail. Like I said, I don't think it's just all bad or all good. There's like snippets of things that I do really like and appreciate, and a lot of that tends to center around characters like Sphene or totally not Steiner from Final Fantasy IX, but as a robot. And I really liked Living Memory, personally. I know some people have issues with it, but I personally really like it. So I think, especially for a game like Final Fantasy XIV that is as story-centered and focused as it is, like more so than most other MMORPGs out there, Final Fantasy XIV is kind of ride or die with the story. I can't even say that I'm pessimistic about its future. I would say I'm cautiously, very cautiously optimistic, because the cautious part comes into if they want to lean back in terms of the Rite of Succession from Dawntrail, but the optimistic part comes in if they want to lean in on certain elements of Alexandria, but also mainly if they want to revert to the style of story that was there in the Arcadian, because I think that was actually genuinely good, and I think for like a first raid tier, it's probably my favorite story they've done for like a 0.0 raid patch story. I can't really think of another one that kind of rivals it. And it mainly comes down to the characters, which I thought was actually Dawntrail's MSQ's biggest weakness. I just didn't care about anyone in that story, really. But when it came to the Arcadian, I cared about every character that was introduced or talked about. Every fight was really cool, even if they didn't have a lot of screen presence or on time, whatever. I really liked them, like Honeybee. Just a big personality, and her personality and character come through the fight, and it works so well. You have like this minor villain when it came to Bomberman, the third fight. He was really cool as well. Black Cat was awesome, and I love the progression of her own story with her sister throughout the Arcadian, and it all culminates with the fourth fight, who was really cool. It introduces a really cool element and just narrative plot device that will be expanded on in the future with the Arcadian. The announcer is just a big lovable character. Making him a Lalafell was the absolute perfect choice with that mustache and the hat as like the ring announcer, because they're leaning into the whimsy, they're leaning into the wrestling elements. Like, you can just feel that wrestling WWE love pouring from every orifice of the Arcadian raid. And if the future of Dawntrail in the patches can follow just that style of story to where you matter as the main character, because we are playing a character that we've played for hundreds and hundreds of hours at this point in the story. We are, at least for me and for many others, heavily invested in this character. I don't want to just be treated as this like side character, and some people are fine with that. I can understand that, and if the story is very well executed, I can get over that and be okay with that. But the stories in 14 that I really come to appreciate and love and remember are the ones where the Warrior of Light doesn't just feel like a silent protagonist, but feels like an active participant in the Silence of the Seventh Dawn. Whether that is Heavensward with Haurchefant, or whether that is Stormblood with Xenos, or whether that is Shadowbringers in the scene before we go to Amarat, where Urianger apologizes to us in front of all the other Scions, or G'raha Tia, like, lets it all out after the Innocence fight, or an Endwalker with Meteion, all of Elpis, and in the final scenes in Ultima Thule. Those are the stories that really stand out to me, because those are the ones that resonate the most for me. I like being an active participant in the actual story. That's just something I appreciate about storytelling, and especially video games. I think one of the best examples of the Warrior of Light kind of taking a step back in this approach would actually be Garlemald of Endwalker, funnily enough, with old Quintus and Alphinaud and Alisaie arguably being more important than the Warrior of Light there, even though the Warrior of Light was still a massively important character in that storyline. I think the spotlight was especially on Quintus there, that one guy whose name I always forget, the Garlean guy we followed around, but also Alisaie and Alphinaud. That's what I think the Arcadian does so well that the MSQ of Dawntrail doesn't do all that well, is that the Warrior of Light and the Silence of the Seventh Dawn just kind of feel like they're there for arm candy more than anything. Instead of being active participants in the actual story going on, they're just there for a couple of scenes saying, hey, we're here, we're cool, it's a bit of fan service, we're gonna kind of bow out, but then the characters that are taking center stage for Dawntrail aren't particularly all that inspired for me, or all that cool or fun. I think Zoralja is one of the most basic villains we've ever had, and to me it's just kind of Xenos, but way less interesting. Wuklamach just reminds me of someone's parody of like a Naruto, with Talk No Jutsu, but with just less interesting scenes and less interesting plot devices surrounding them. Like a character like Naruto, like if you look at him, he can be very similar to Wuklamach in terms of actual writing and dialogue and tone and all that. But you have certain plot elements with Naruto, with like the Nine Tails and the characters that surround Naruto, that make it far more palatable and enjoyable, at least for me. Again, this is all just my own personal subjective opinion. You don't really get that with Wuklamach, or at least I don't. Kind of her main identifying trait is that she's kind of incompetent for most of the story, despite the fact that she's in the running to become the leader of Tuliolol. Maybe it's supposed to parody like modern politics, in which case that's kind of funny, but I just don't think it worked with the execution of Dawntrail. Characters felt far too tropey and one-dimensional, and their growth felt far too predictable, or just rushed and not shown properly for me to really care by the end. But again, that doesn't happen in the Arcadian, which is why I'm talking about this whole like tale of two halves, because with Dawntrail being as content heavy and dense as it's lined up to be in the patches, with things like cosmic exploration, which just looks absolutely wild if you've seen a couple of the screenshots that have come out from the China Fan Fest. But we have another deep dungeon, more variant dungeons, we have that ultimate, we have the Alliance raid tiers coming down the line, we have more Arcadian, we have the new Bosja, Beastmaster way down the line. There's like a lot of content coming down the line for Dawntrail, and if the story can be more in the line of execution that was there in the Arcadian, where even if you want to go for more laid-back, subdued narrative in terms of actual stakes going on, you can still have it be bombastic and silly, but also fun, and have the characters feel unique and not reliant on old characters, but they can stand on their own 2 feet, have interesting personalities, and not just feel as if they're carbon copies of basic anime shonen tropes. 14 has had that in the past, but the characters have always been able to find or carve out their own niche and their own personality and uniqueness that sets them apart from a lot of the rest of the crowd, so they don't just feel one-dimensional or carbon copies of basic tropes and stereotypes. I think one of the best examples of this is both Estinian but also Alphinaud. Like, over the years, yeah, at the very beginning, you could say, okay, I've seen many characters like them before and in other things, but over time, they really carve their own niche, and the development they undergo is really heartwarming and makes them feel as if they can stand on their own 2 feet, be identifiable by themselves, and be someone you can look back on that journey and kind of smile and like and appreciate all that you experienced with them. And perhaps some people feel that way with the characters of Dawntrail, and that's entirely fine. At the end of the day, it's a video game. I hope you enjoyed it. But I don't think that style of storytelling is entirely lost, and I think it's unfair to say that, especially when we have something as good as the Arcadian there. Now, you may be asking, Jmulls, why are you yapping on about this so much? Well, it's because a lot of people can kind of get hyper-focused in on their one line of thinking. Whether you absolutely love Final Fantasy XIV Dawntrail unabashedly, and there's no mistakes, there's no criticisms, there's no critiques that can be levied at it, or you hate it so much, it's nothing but quote-unquote woke nonsense or whatever. It's just bad, Wuklamat's bad, the story's bad, Tuliolol's bad, if you like it, you're bad, skill issue, whatever. And this very binary way of thinking just does a disservice to everybody, because I don't think most people enjoy arguing in this extremely rudimentary and simplistic way of thinking. Like with everything, there's going to be elements that we like and elements that we don't like, and that's fine. And for me, Dawntrail edged or had more of things that I didn't like than things that I did like, and the things that I did like didn't outshine the things that I didn't like. And you know what? That's okay. Because that was just the first part, the MSQ, which is an important thing, and I wish they didn't mess it up for me. However, when it comes to the post-game, there's so many things about Dawntrail that I absolutely love. I love Solution 9 as a location. Going there is always fun, even when I'm just looking at the surroundings or the aesthetics of the place. I love Heritage Found. I love Living Memory, even though some people take issue with the story that happened there. I don't really. I really liked what happened in Living Memory. I love the Arcadian. I love the actual dungeons. I love the raid. And I think one of the most important elements of constructive feedback is to look at everything objectively, but also subjectively, and being willing to admit when you like a thing, but also when you don't like a thing, and not letting one thing cloud your judgment of another. Internet discourse has always been a realm of discussion that can make you lose brain cells from just some of the takes you see other people have. But I think especially nowadays, with how popular game discussion has become, and how accessible it has also become, far too often can it resort down to just basic name-calling or culture war crap, or digging trenches for your one position and not being receptive to anything else. And I think it does not only a detriment to the game, but also to yourself. Why would I want to put up blinders for me to obscure my way of thinking or how I could react to something into the future? Like, if I don't like a thing, let's go and use me as an example here. I don't like the story of Dawntrail all that much, but I'd rather walk into the patch stories with an open mind and being willing to say, you know what, I really like this, instead of being grumpy and moody and being like, okay, now prove me wrong, liberal. It's like, I would rather approach it with a mind frame and a way of thinking to where I can be open and receptive to things, because I would want to enjoy the game. Because at the end of the day, it's just a game, and I want to enjoy the game. I'd rather be on the lookout for things that I do like, and this is something I try and hone in every now and then with this channel. I'd rather look out for things that I do like about something, because I'd be more receptive to find even more things, or I'd focus in on even small things that I like, but put more emphasis and attention on those elements than things that I don't like. Because this is another element of online discourse that I see from time to time, which is like people hyper-focus in on one element of something that may not be the best, or it may just be bad. And sure, we can agree that this one element of this one thing is particularly bad. But you use that one example to argue that the entire orchard is infested. Like, sure, maybe you don't like this one apple, but it doesn't mean the whole batch is bad. It could be representative of a larger problem, sure, like my issues with pacing and writing and character development of Dawntrail. But it doesn't mean everything about Dawntrail is bad. And I think that way of thinking does the biggest disservice to you, or to me, if I'm the one thinking it. Because you're putting yourself in a position to where you'll more negatively react to something than you probably ordinarily would. And I don't think that's doing anyone any favors, or doing anything any good. So yeah, next couple of months should be extremely interesting for Final Fantasy XIV. We got that live letter where they'll go over the content cadence for the remainder of Dawntrail. Then we got hype for 7.1 and all that. And I just want to take a bit of time here today just to go over what I think to be the main talking points, or the things that I just wanted to cover about the state of Final Fantasy XIV Dawntrail right now. And I hope I covered everything. And with that, I'll call the video there for the day. Thank you all for tuning in. My pleasure for making the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Stay safe, have a great day. Leave a comment down below with one thing you didn't like about Final Fantasy XIV Dawntrail, but also one thing you did like. And these things to be either big or small, or like massive or inconsequential. Just let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts, hear your opinions, and to hear your perspective. positives. Let's get some good constructive feedback going in the comments. Stay safe, have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye bye everybody, until we meet again!